Okay, agenda item number 2, consent agenda for February 2018 business reports, the minutes of February 26th and 28th, March 5th, 12th, 14th, 2018 school committee meeting, personnel and field trips. Are there any items on the meeting, excuse me, are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minutes from February 26th.
February 26th. All right, any others?
There's one that I wanted, but I'm gonna have to check, sorry. It might be the same one.
Okay, well,
Is it a name spelled?
Ms. Hutchinson's name is omitted.
Yes. No, it's from March 5th. Thank you.
any others? So just the February 26th? All right, hearing no...
And March 5th.
March 5th.
Oh, March 5th, I did not hear that one. Thank you for catching that. All right, hearing no other objections, or if there are no other objects, the consent agenda will be adopted. All right, moving on. All right,
So let's find out what adjustment for the March 5th.
all right. So we'll move forward. What are the adjustments for March 5th?
March 5th. Elena Clothier's blessing is spelled Clothier instead of Clothier. It should be Clothier.
Do we have to make a motion for each one separately?
No, we could have one motion to accept
Okay.
the minutes as amended.
So the February 26th, Ms. Hutchinson's name, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
She did attend the meeting because she voted. She was just omitted. All right, is there a, we have to make a motion, right? Motion, is there a motion to make the changes as amended?
So moved.
Mr. Jensen, we have a second from Ms. Kortemash. Those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. All set? Okay. Moving ahead to agenda item number 3. This is for public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items, now and later on agenda items. Comments that pertain to staff personnel matters or students' issues should be directed to the superintendent or appropriate staff members of the Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitious, and related to the matter at hand. Are there any members of the audience that like to come to the podium and speak on non-agenda items? Please step up to the podium, address yourself as well as where you're from.
Hi, I'm Karen McClure-Richard. I live in Ward 5. I just wanted to invite you all to the Lewiston High School Center Stage Ensemble. The Drama Club is presenting Bye Bye Birdie. It's a really fun show. It's Elvis-inspired, takes you back to Sweet Apple, Ohio in 1958. So the costumes and the songs and the dance, everything is very much to that period. The kids have been working hard. They're working right now, and they've been working every day for a few weeks now. We have a live pit that also includes students, teachers, and community members. So the show opens Thursday night, 7:30, runs Friday night, 7:30, Saturday night, 7:30, and there's a 2 o'clock matinee on Saturday as well. And it's at Lewiston Middle School. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Richards, for that information. We appreciate it. Seeing no student representatives, we'll move forward to item number 5, to receive and approve a plan to make up excessive snow days, to be presented by Mr. Bill Webster.
Thank you. Well, this is certainly an interesting topic and one that generates a lot of conversation. And as I say in my revised memo, which was posted today, hopefully you've had a chance to see that. It was also posted on social media. Received well in excess of 100 ideas, some different, some in full support. I think some of the things that were pointed out that I did not fully understand. It's a little harder to add an hour to the day in Lewiston than in a lot of other communities. We have after-school programming, 21st century, that the board is generally familiar with. That would cut into meeting the federal requirement under that grant in terms of the hours served. Also, it was pointed out to me that programs like Lewiston Academy, which begin right after 3 o'clock-ish, would be impacted. So with that information, and then also there are a couple of other ideas that were put forth that I put in my memo as E and F. One, that we would eliminate the early release days planned for the remainder of the year. And another one, this idea of a snow day homework pack, which, while I don't think we're ready for it now in Lewiston, it is something that other school districts, particularly smaller ones, have done, and that we may want to give consideration with at one point. So I've included in my memo a proposed motion that would be in order of priority, and I have listed at least my thought on the order of priorities, and the board may choose otherwise, but if adopted, what my intent would be is to take them in order of priority and only use them if absolutely necessary. Because as things stand right now, if we have no other snow days, I don't know if this is wood, the last student day would be Thursday, June 21st, and the last teacher day would be Friday, June 22nd, and I'd be fine if we were able to just keep it like that. I did look in my weather phone app, and for the next 15 days, not that they can go out that far, it looks pretty good. If I had paid $4, they would have gone out 25 days, but I decided I'd save the $4. The other thing that while it's not specifically part of the proposed motion, I do think it's something that the board may want to at least reflect on, and that is a number of people talked about to me, if we had had early releases for weather-related events, that we probably would have saved 2 snow days, because I had to make that decision based on the full day. At the same time, and this is what's stopped school committees in the past from being supportive of this, we can reflect on our experience in McMahon where we had the main water break. So we had to notify parents in the morning that we were going to be dismissing. In that case, fortunately, we had staff on every bus, and we went up to every door to ensure that a child would come home to an occupied house. And if not, we brought that child back to McMahon. There were about 40 kids that came back to McMahon. If you multiply that by 6 elementary schools, there are going to be 200 plus kids out there home alone. And that's always been why the board's been reticent to make that change. But I did want to point that out because that was something that was raised by a number of people. The other thing I'd mention is that when we get to the calendar discussion, which is the next item on the agenda, we can talk about next year's days and the impact of vacations and maybe some of the options there. So I'd be pleased to answer any questions. There may be some in the audience that also have comments that the board may want to reflect on. But I do have a proposed motion for your consideration, and I do at least list my opinion, which does include reflecting on all the feedback I received, the priority that we would want to consider.
Opening it up to discussion from the board. Ms. Hutchinson.
Mr. Webster, could you tell me how many days would be made up if we eliminated the early release days planned for the rest of the year?
We would make up one day.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd be curious to see what any members of the audience have to say before we dig too far into it, I suppose.
All right, opening it up to the audience. If you'd like to say anything on this subject matter, please step up to the podium. Sure.
So I listed 6 options, and maybe what would be most helpful for those that don't have it in front of them, I'll just list them in my suggested order of priority. And again, this would only come about if we had another snow day or two. So my first suggestion was we make the last teacher workshop day a half day for students. So that means students would go to school a half day on that Friday. That would count as meets the requirements of Additional Student Day. It doesn't need commissioner approval because it would meet that 4-hour requirement. If we do this, teachers would still get paid for and owe an additional day. And they could either make that up by adding an hour or to other days, or participating in some other summer professional development opportunity. We'd have to have a checklist and work with teachers in terms of their determination of how they would choose to use that day. And obviously, that's something we'd have to work out details with the Lewiston Education Association as well. My second choice was to eliminate the remaining early release days for this year. As this will increase student instructional time, it qualifies for meeting the state requirements, even though it might not make sense to people because they're already getting credit for that day, but that's just the way the policy interpretation works. This would be relatively easy to implement. My concern is that there's a lot of work that needs to happen, not the least of which is some of the changes that we're going to be making and student reporting and the like, and those times are valuable, so that is a concern there. The third option that I had was to add an hour to every Thursday beginning February 5th for 5 weeks. That would indeed add or be equal to an additional day. Again, there are problems, and I'm hoping that we wouldn't get to that. The fourth option I selected was continuing that trend, adding another hour to every Thursday beginning May 17th. The fifth option that I had was the homework pack, which I don't think really is realistic, but put it on as an option. And the last option was adding an hour of instruction to every day the week of May 21st. And a lot of feedback on that. Kids are exhausted now in many cases, and how we would implement that. We've got issues, how do we do pre-K, the impact with the after-school program and the like. So those are the 6 options, and I'd like to think, at least based on past experiences, that probably at most we wouldn't get by the first 2 unless something really screwy happens.
Ms. Quartermash?
So just to clarify, if we were to eliminate the half days or the early release days, those 2 remaining early release days would count as 1 makeup day.
And actually, there's one that we lost that we have an effective schedule, so it'd be 3. So those 2 hours will 6 hours, which will constitute 1 day.
Where's the third one?
I'd have to go back, I don't have the calendar in front of me as to which one we lost.
For this calendar year?
Yes,
Okay, because there's one April 11th and May 16th, but you're saying that there's another one that's going to be,
well, there's, because we lost one due to a snow day,
okay.
and I would argue that that would have been on a certain day and we wouldn't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion from the board before we open up to the public? Anyone from the public would like to step up to the podium, please? State your name and address or ward. That's okay.
Janet Bowden, 18 Roslyn Ave. I just had a question. I heard you mention an extra hour on Thursdays, and I'm just curious why you picked Thursdays instead of Wednesdays. And I only asked because Wednesdays there is no 21st century after school, so I didn't know if that would be a more logical day to do it on, if that were the option that you went with.
So originally my thinking on picking Thursday was that there was, we didn't have the conflict with the PLCs and the early release days, because how do you add an hour to an early release day? That would, to me, would just be thoroughly confusing. But your point's well taken in terms of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And, conceivably, the board could amend this to, 1 hour to a day for 5 consecutive weeks, and we could work with that further. So that's a good point.
Okay. And I just one more question on it. Did you by chance reach out to the teachers and ask them what their preference was on these options?
Yes, I corresponded with all teachers, actually with all staff, and probably received about 50 responses. And I would say that the responses essentially married the order of the recommendations that I have here. There were differences, but generally they were very supportive. A lot of them pointed out the challenge of that 1 hour, particularly for things like pre-K and our special ed students.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Jessica Gothier, Ward 7. I would like to agree as far as the Wednesdays, due to I have 3 children in elementary school and middle school, and all of their activities are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that would extend their day even longer. Wednesdays in our house is the only day that doesn't have anything. Thank you.
Any other discussion before we move it back to the board? All right. Is it in regards to this agenda item? Yes. If you'd like, just step up to the podium, please.
Button. You can't hear me without the microphone. Come on. Rachel Nato. I'm in Ward 2, but I also teach at LHS. So this wouldn't be some ideas for this year, but going forward. One of the ideas I had was, going into Thursday's storm 2 weeks ago, I had 6 IEPs and a written notice to do. I could have easily sat home on a snow day and done 7 hours worth of work. And if there was a way to do a work from home day for teachers, and then a future workshop day could be used to make up a snow day for the kids, I think that's something we could consider. We'd have to probably do something with accountability, I'm sure, but that's just one idea I had. I know my husband works from home, so it's a thing now that this is what people do. There's a snow day, people work from home, and I always have that much work easily. The other idea was for your early release days. The weather forecasting has been pretty accurate most of the time, And usually we know at least a day or two beforehand that we're getting something big that might start later in the day. And it seems to me if we start doing early release days, there are going to be some occasions that we're going to be able to warn parents ahead of time and teachers to plan for a high possibility that we could be doing an early release day for an upcoming snowstorm. It's not like we're surprised by these, usually. Just a thought.
Any others from the audience that would like to speak on this agenda item? And we have to hit the button because it's being videotaped, so we have to have.
Mike
sure
McGraw,
those-
Lewiston High School. I have an idea of a hybrid. Lewiston High School could go until 2:30 because that's when the contract calls for teachers. And if they added the half hour for the correct number of days, that doesn't interfere with 21st century. And I think that could alleviate the problem at the high school. As far as middle school and elementary school, they have a different type of schedule, and I think that maybe the high school could deal with that pretty efficiently because most teachers are there until 2:30, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and I know that some of them come in very early in the morning too, and I'm sure that's the same with middle and elementary school. So that's kind of a proposal that could work for Lewiston High School. And I think there are a variety of different things that have been proposed for the rest of the school year. So maybe to hybridize might be one part of a solution. Thanks.
And I appreciate your thoughts, Mike, on that. The one challenge we have is our bus schedule is so tight, so that bus that leaves the high school 15 minutes later means that we're going to have those elementary schools also be 15 minutes later or 20, whatever it might be. And some of those, that means there's going to be some kids getting home close to 5 o'clock. But that is definitely an option. To do something like that would probably have to be like essentially added to every day for the rest of the year potentially, or whenever we started it. And there are some districts that have done just that.
Any other public comment on this agenda item?
Kim Brown, I'm at Farwell. I can speak for my third grade students that by 2:30 itself is already difficult to stay engaged, and so an extra hour would be challenging on that. But speaking for colleagues, I'm not in this part of my life yet, but colleagues that have young children, and speaking from somebody who will eventually, and my husband works self-employed, so if they're getting out of work another hour later and they have to pick children up from childcare by 5, especially if they're traveling, that could be challenging for them if they don't have any other means of somebody to pick up their own kids. So I know there's quite a few staff members at our school that have little kids, and they are the only ones who are commuting them back and forth for childcare. So for staff members, this could be challenging as well as it is for the kids. So.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move it back to the board if there's any other discussion from the board.
So we could move option A at this point and just go from there. I mean, if we have another snow day, we could have the same discussion. We're meeting enough during budget times, right? Option A would get us by.
That is potentially correct. If we have a 2-day snowstorm, which we had last week, and option A would still be predicated on having reaching an agreement with the Lewiston Education Association.
All right. we're meeting twice a week, so I just think, I think we should go with option A and move on, because we can discuss this for hours. And I just, and there's a good chance we're not going to get any more snow. That's going to cause school to be canceled, so I'm going to sit.
Says Wednesday night.
Point. All right. I would make a motion that we adopt option A of the superintendent's recommendation.
Oh, wait, we have a motion for option A. Any other? Oh, we have a comment.
We can get the motion.
Yeah, is there a second of the motion first?
Second.
Mr. Kerr and Hutchinson. Discussion to the board? Yes? All discussions open for the subject matter.
Okay, so it's not just to his motion.
You do.
The DOE commissioner had put out a newsletter recently on March 6th regarding snow days in Maine because of the amount of snow that we've had all over the state. And part of it, I noted, says that the commissioner will grant waivers beyond the 175 days of school, the requirement for 175 days. They'll only be granted after school officials have exhausted all reasonable avenues for making up lost snow days and in extraordinary circumstances. So does that mean there is an option that if we can't come up with one of these arrangements to meet those 175 days, that you could file a waiver and we could not have to meet those 175 days?
So I'm not an attorney, but my interpretation of what the commissioner said was that he would want to see a good faith effort on the part of the school board in coming up with a plan. And then, despite those best efforts, if there were some a rare blizzard in May, and consider it at that point. But I would think that it would be imperative for this board to adopt some measure tonight before something like that could be used.
I'd be okay with option A. I know if we do that, let's see, teachers or staff would have to make up additional professional development time, if I'm reading that correctly. I heard a good suggestion there before. Could we give them the option to work at home to make up that time? That way it wouldn't have to cover any particular school day. And I know a lot of staff work from home as is. If I could push for that option, I would.
So I think the details are something we would have to work out with the LEA. Certainly an option could be related to home. We would want it to be a professional development opportunity and not a regular, preparing lessons and that like. But that's certainly a possibility. And there may be other options that we haven't thought of, whether it's a program that maybe qualifies for continuing education credits between now and the end of the year, or something this summer. There are a lot of professional development opportunities, and that would be another option. But yes, I wouldn't rule that out.
Mr. Chair? Could I just get clarification as to why we just don't continue on to the next school day?
So without a change in our practice, one additional snow day would move the teacher workshop day to Monday, June 25th, I believe it would be. So there are a number of issues. One, we have construction projects that are ready to go. High school parking lot, for example. And any day delay at the beginning increases the risk that we won't be ready come the start of school in August. Secondly, I feel for our custodial staff because increasingly our schools are run on a year-round basis, and summer school starts the following week, And I just know that our staff really needs that time to do some of the work that they do each and every free period they have. And then there are professional development opportunities that day, that week for teachers, and I just think them finishing up on the Friday before, having a weekend to catch their breath before jumping right into the fire on something else. But absent any action, that would definitely be the course that we would take.
And I'll add, we're in pretty good shape compared to some schools that have 11 or 12 days that they have to figure out. And we're such a big district that we're feeling the squeeze trying to figure this out. And option A, if I'm correct, you still have to approach the LEA to determine if they're okay with it and how we would make up a professional development day for them. So it all comes down to contracts, negotiations, and tax dollars, and how much it costs for us to educate our students. So there's always the big picture that we have to look at. Any other discussion on the board? Yes, that's right.
So since there are so many other factors involved, if we only have the one option and then we have to come back right back to the table, let's say the LEA says, no, we won't do it. So could we have two options, A, and let's say eliminating the early release days as a secondary, so that we have two options so that we're not starting back from scratch?
So you're suggesting A as well as E as an option? Like
A first and then E.
Okay, we would have to first make a motion on the motion on the table.
Well, I'd be okay with a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment. Look at that, he's getting friendly.
That's my middle name, Friendly.
Is that what it is?
We may want to speak to our parliamentarian, but if the person who made the motion and seconded it would agree to that friendly amendment, I think we can proceed with the revised motion.
We have a motion and a second go ahead.
I think Mark will have to make the motion.
I think he just did, but
Yeah.
would you
Could you
repeat your
summarize it?
motion for the amendment?
Well, I'm not making the amendment, but I'm saying I would agree to an amendment. And Tina would have to acknowledge agree to that as well, because she seconded it. I'm asking.
Okay. So you would have to make the new motion as well, is my understanding.
Okay.
Because it's yours.
So A and what?
E.
So I would amend my motion to adopt A and E of the superintendent's recommendation.
Is Ms. Hutchinson approval of them?
You didn't have it on either, so I would second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the amended position on the table at the moment. Is there discussion from the board? A and E, yep. Okay. Those in favor? Those against? Okay. One against? Nobody abstained. You got all that written down? Maybe. Got it? Okay. Moving ahead to agenda item number 6, to receive and approve the first reading of the 2018-19 school calendar. Mr. Bill Webster.
Yes, so in the packet is a school calendar that is identical to what the board was given over a month ago, with 2 possible revisions. And these are presented more to initiate discussion than necessarily to constitute what should be adopted. The first change is the planned teacher exchange day which is on March 22nd of 2019. And I might mention up front that most other area districts use this as a workshop day, but they don't have the March parent-teacher conferences where our teachers work 2 evenings, and in exchange for doing that, we've given them this day off. So under state law, we have to negotiate with the other districts to send students to Lewiston Regional Technical Center. And we are limited as to the number of what are called dissimilar days. So this being an exchange day and other districts it being a workshop day, it is not a dissimilar day because it doesn't affect students. If, however, we used it as a makeup day, and it might, for example, let's say that we were to say if we've already used, and I'm just making this up, 5 snow days as of March 1st, this is going to be a student day. It would be a dissimilar day, and we would have to build that into our equation. I think, though, we had 4 dissimilar days in this year's calendars, and this would make it the 5th. So if we did that, again, that would become a student day, and teachers, instead of having a day off in March, they would in fact get out a day earlier at the end of the school year. So I think, that may be a debatable possibility, but it's certainly an option. The other thing on this calendar is presenting 2 days in the in the April 2019 break as potential makeup days. And again, this would be along the lines probably if we had, and I'm just making this up, more than 8 snow days by April 1st, those are going to be student days or something to that effect. This is presented here because more than one school committee member has mentioned this possibility to me. And it's not something that I necessarily support, but it is something that more and more people have talked about. And also from the standpoint that there are many states that only have 1 school vacation for K-12 students in March. I have 2 nephews that live in Maryland, just as an example, and next week is their vacation week. There is no February break. There is no April break. This, I don't believe, is something that Lewiston can or should implement unilaterally. There'll be a lot of pressure, particularly in keeping that February vacation. And if you're going to have a vacation in February, it's an awful long time not to have a vacation in April. March kind of fell in between. And whether that's something that this board would like to pursue further with state authorities, although we've been told this is not a requirement of law. So the board does have this flexibility. I do think, though, that vacation uncertainty is a challenge, particularly for staff and families that may be planning trips, vacations during that week. I know, speaking personally, that was the week I took my girls on college trips. It was ideal timing before they made any final decision or as to who they were going to apply to in the fall. Whatever the board does or wants to do, I suggest that the calendar be adopted as a first read tonight so that it will come back again. So just like a policy that the board would have 2 votes on. And I only say that because I think if the board, as an example, were to adopt it with either the March and or April potential snow day makeup days, there may be those in the community that would like to give feedback on that just haven't been a focus. And that by having a first and second vote, that will allow that to happen. I just wanted to refresh my memory briefly in taking a look at my brief cover memo, and I think that I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover. So again, I could see the board adopting this calendar as amended if, for example, there was determination that we don't want to change April vacation, or we don't want to use March as an exchange day, or for some other reason. And I should also point out, because we haven't really talked about this calendar much, but there's another significant element on this calendar that the board at least needs to be conscious about. And that is how we handled the fall parent-teacher conferences. So the prior board supported us basically having a day in October that was a non-student day in which we gave expanded parent-teacher conferences. It also allowed us to have a full day of professional development for ed techs, and it worked very well in that regard. And we met the requirements in law in that when we were doing this, not all schools were participating. And in fact, we had over half of our student body always in attendance on every day. But at the end of the day, when you add up the number of student days across the whole year, students are only receiving 174 days, not 175. If I had my druthers and if money were not an object, I would say let's add another day to the school year, which would ensure that students meet the 175 days and still have that flexibility of giving teachers that additional time to have real meaningful discussions with parents on children. So I bring that up because that is, I think, significance and not something that should be taken lightly, or I just want to make sure the board fully understands that.
Discussion from the board? Ms. Parks?
I know I've asked this in the past and I don't remember the answer, so I'm going to ask again. I know other districts do half-day Fridays and half-days before a vacation, so it counts as a student day, and then the other half can be teacher workshop. Why do we do Wednesdays instead of Fridays? Is there a reason we can't do half-day Fridays and then a half-day before each vacation, and that would add extra days to the calendar?
So that is certainly an option. It's something that I would be very interested in the input from the LEA on as to how they would view that. Traditionally, we've had 3 Wednesdays a month be the PLC days, professional learning community days, in each school, and teachers are required to participate in those. And by having the early release days in those days, it gives us that extended window of time. If it were moved to Fridays, I don't see teachers wanting to stay beyond the traditional time. So I don't see us moving the PLC days to Fridays, and it would make, not that it couldn't happen, but I think it might make the Wednesdays less effective, or certainly less able to have that full block of time. There may be some in the audience that have more information on that, but that's my understanding.
Any other discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to chat a little bit about April vacation, the possible snow day makeup on the 18th and 19th. I think you either don't mess with it and leave it as is, or you take it out. I think, saying 2 weeks before April vacation, sorry teachers, but you're going to have to work. I don't think that's a good plan. I would think if I was a teacher, I'd be planning months ahead of time for my April vacation and then not having to go. So that's my 2 cents on that. I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
Ms. Wright?
I would agree with
Ms. Estabrook's guess on that, as well as I'm sure we'd hear from a lot of parents about their vacation plans as well.
Any others on the board? It's quite a juggling act, that's for sure. It, has to deal with the budget, a lot of discussion on certain vacation days. One that I haven't heard, I'm curious if you've heard, if we just started earlier, like say, I'd hate to, I know some people have said June is too hot. I think August is too hot too, but has that been discussed and so forth?
So I did receive a couple of suggestions that we start a week earlier, which obviously would mean ending a week earlier in June, regardless of the snow day issue. The challenge there is we need to have agreement with 6 different school districts. And I think the likelihood of that is unlikely.
Maybe this year.
Right, because the calendar that we have here is something that the superintendents first met and put together and came to an agreement on in January. And so this calendar has already been presented in different forms to the other boards. An example of the change we made in this calendar, the January workshop day was moved from January 2nd to January 22nd, the day after Martin Luther King Day. There was just feeling that too many teachers, while they really liked the teacher-led professional development on that day, they'd been away from their classrooms for 2 weeks in many cases, or close to that, and really were anxious to get the year started and were thinking about getting ready for the next day. So superintendents agreed, and that's why that changed in this draft. But if it were the desire of this board, I'd be happy to pursue this, but it's probably for the following year, not this year, or 2019 and 20, not 18, 19.
All right, any further discussion? No? Okay. We open it up to the public. If you'd like, please state your name and location and press the button on the podium so the people on the video feed can hear you.
Samantha Garnett Sias, 74 Rachel Boulevard. I work at the high school and work with the LEA. Got my snow boots on today, seems fitting given our conversation. But a couple of notes about the proposed calendar, and I've already shared thoughts with Mr. Webster. But the full day conferences that are scheduled in October, concern that I have is that that's another day without instruction for our students, and it seems like more than ever we're losing instructional time for various reasons. So, every moment is precious with our students. So, not having that day is something that we would want to think about. And I know, Mr. Webster, you've agreed at thinking about a different solution possibly for that. But I would definitely concur with Ms. Estabrook and then Ms. Ray that I'm willing to bet there are families in the Lewiston school community and also teachers that maybe already have next year's April vacation booked, like paid for. So even knowing now might be just because it's historically been that way, right? So just something to consider as you process your first and second reading.
Let's turn this on first. So Matt Roy, Ward 6. Bill, the historical use, the dissimilar days. Historically, that's as long as you've been the superintendent for the last 8 years. That's been about 4, correct?
When I first got here, it was 9, and we were sanctioned by DOE, but we got it down.
So
it's
what's
averaged
the
4.
okay? So, but the last few years, it's been about 4 December days, including the draft as currently written. Currently, correct?
That's correct, and the DOE maximum December days is 5.
All right. So, if let's say, for instance, next year's winter is worse than this year, and we adopt both option A, B, and we have to use those options, we're going to get sanctioned again, whatever that actually means. Probably you get a nice you get a nice letter from the commissioner. Probably, I imagine, whoever the commissioner will be by 2019. Well, it's going to be a different governor. I'm presuming a different commissioner. So we have that problem. And then the other point, as the Sammy just made about, there's probably a lot of people that plan their vacations out. I know my sister's thinking taking a vacation to Florida with my niece, and who knows, maybe my parents will go to in February, but she doesn't go to Lewiston, so it's not that problem. Of course, that brings up that, well, of course, then there's the arbitrary, well, getting back to the last memo about the certain schools with the, charter schools about having snow packets. 85% seems a little arbitrary, just like the 95% when it comes to standardized testing. Because basically, if you have a 2-hour delay and you get half plus one of your students to actually show up that day, it counts as a full day. So there's the inconsistency there too. And apparently, no one's really aware what that actual limit is, as you said in your memo, Bill.
The 85% is something that was told to me, but I have not verified it. I do not know if that's true. I do know that there are schools that do use them. I'm not aware of any large districts that do, but there are schools that do them.
Like I said, by personal knowledge, I know that the Acadia Charter School here in Lewiston does, or Acadia Academy, I believe. So, of course, then there's, well, like you said, the 6 of you, the superintendents that make up our CTE center, talk about this in January. When is the deadline? I probably should know, like Ms. Parks, I should probably know the answer to this, being a former school board member, but when is the actual deadline that we have to submit our calendar to DOE?
Just a reminder, I normally don't allow this as a question and answer session, and I usually only allow about 2 to 3 minutes. So just let's please wrap it up after this, okay? Thank you.
So I don't think the deadline with DOE is an issue. I think it's an issue with our teachers and staff and families, because many of them are booking their plans a year in advance. So I've always operated on wanting to have a calendar adopted prior to April break.
And as one of the other members of the public spoke in, not to keep dragging Sammy in this, but it's, it kind of goes with the territory, being the president of the teacher union to a certain degree about these things. That well, you have at a certain point, people playing these things, and there's also the consideration about whatever sanction means. It's just like, do you use the carrot and the stick idea when it comes to school budgets and those issues? It's probably just a letter and here you go, because it's never actually been enforced. And as school board members, I guess I'll speak to myself.
Mr. Roy, your time's
in a
up.
present.
Thank you.
It hasn't been 3 minutes.
It's been well over that.
No, Mr. Chair, I disagree.
This is not an argument, Mr. Roy. You can either have a seat or you can leave. Thank you. Any others from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So for clarification, if we want to do this as a first read, meaning we would come back to it with any sort of changes we want to make, do we make a motion for a first, how does that work? How do we do that to say if we want it as a first read? Is it a motion we have to vote on?
And we can confer with Ms. Ray as well.
I believe we would include that in our motion, that this is the first read with amendments to be forwarded to, I imagine, Bill, and the second read to set a date for that.
Any other discussion?
So just, I would be supported as presented, except for the April vacation dates. So
Is there a motion or more discussion?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I'll get back to the agenda. I move we receive and, receive and approve the first reading of the 2018-2019 school calendar, amended to exclude the dates of April 18th and 19th as possible school makeup days.
Second.
There's no makeup. Oh, thanks. Good teamwork there.
We have a motion on the table by Mr. Jensen, a second by Ms. Hutchinson. Any other further discussion? As a first read. Yeah. All right, seeing no further discussion, those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
We'll just plan on bringing it back to the next regular meeting.
Moving ahead to agenda item number 7, to receive and approve agreement with other school districts to form regional service center. This will be presented by Mr. Webster.
Yes, this is my night for talking. So just by way of introduction, particularly those in the audience that may not be fully familiar with this, the state budget that passed in the wee hours of last July 1st included a law related to what are called regional service centers. And basically under this law, designed to encourage districts to combine forces in the creation of centers that would provide services. And the services had to meet certain criteria in the law. And districts that participate in these centers get additional subsidy. And those that do not get the additional subsidy and in effect get a penalty for not participating. So I have been in contact with my colleagues since last fall, and at the end of the day, Auburn, MSAD 52, which is Turner, and RSU 16, Poland, and Lewiston presented it was just a one-page plan of what we might do to the Department of Education last November. I think December 1st might have been the deadline. No commitment on anyone's part. But districts that filed that intent were to receive the additional subsidy on their state subsidy report. And when we got our state subsidy report on January 31st, it did indeed include $191,000. If you look on, I think it's page 5 of the report, you'll see that in your budget books. $191,000 is not small change, and so as I've shared with this board and the prior board, my intent was to continue to pursue this if I did not feel it was unduly troublesome. And while we've been working here locally, DOE has also been relaxing its interpretation of various rules. Some of the concerns, for example, at the beginning were that if you participated in one of these, you were a member for life. And that's not the type of thing that locals like to hear. So Drummond Woodson was able to draft something with their new relaxed rules. And this has also been reviewed by our school attorney. And you have it in your packet. If RSU 16 has already approved this, and if this body here approves it, the next step would be for me to send it to the Commissioner of Education to get his approval, and then in time Auburn and Turner can do the same. That's not the end of the story, though, because once it's approved by the commissioner, it then needs to go to voters. This is just a requirement of the law, even though this board has the authority to enter into all kinds of contracts. The ballot wording would be along the lines of, do you approve Lewiston Public Schools joining a regional service center with other area school districts in order to improve educational efficiencies and preserve state subsidy? Now, if we enter this, will it contribute to educational efficiencies? That remains to be seen, because in one sense, we're just adding another layer of administration on top of everything. However, the state, in its wisdom, has granted additional incentives to join. Regional service centers that are created will get an additional payment of $97,000 from the state of Maine. $97,200 from the state of Maine, which can be used in any way that the directors of the center deem fit, including rebating back to the participating districts. So under the proposal as it is right now, without any additional local monies of any kind, the 4 superintendents, or at least 2 that are approved, would be the board of directors, and I am named as the initial executive director, although that could change with a vote. What we're envisioning are that this service center could serve some important functions. One of which is, you may know that we're still waiting to get the final contract, but we have been tentatively awarded a FEDIS grant. FEDIS standing for the Fund for Efficient Delivery of Educational Services. This grant is to investigate and research and plan for ultimately having the opportunity to take over the educational responsibilities for students aged 3 to 5, the special ed services that are now provided by Child Developmental Services. This is a grant would fall under the umbrella of this service center. It includes funds for the hiring of a coordinator, and there are other aspects in the grant, and I had hoped to bring that grant to you tonight for your approval, but it looks now like it will go come at the next regular meeting. We also see this service center is that we could offer a speaker, for example, a leadership development academy that could benefit all the other districts. We've thought about it could pay for a weather service that the 4 districts would share. So there are other things that we're thinking about that could be part of this. I see this as a no-risk opportunity to preserve subsidy and get some additional funds that could be put to good use. And at any time, I think the way the agreement is, prior to February 1st, this school committee could vote to get out of the agreement or get out of the service center to be effective for the coming fiscal year. So with that long-winded introduction, the proposed motion for your consideration is move to approve entering into a regional service agreement with one or more other school districts in the form materially presented herein, and authorize the school committee chair to sign the agreement on behalf of Lewiston Public Schools.
Opening it up for discussion among the board. Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of like utilizing, well, I mean, getting economies of scale here, really seeing what we could do well. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of opportunity there. Some of the concerns I have is I guess an oversight of this created board. I may just not have gotten to it fully, but it seems like it would regulate itself. That'd just be a little bit concerning to me as a school committee if we're putting funds through it. What kind of oversight measures are in place? Are there any in place yet?
So there'd be a couple things. One, under the agreement is drafted, a minimum of 2/3 of the board of superintendents would have to agree before anything could be approved. And so that, particularly where we've got 2 larger districts and 2 smaller districts that are participating in it. And then nothing could be assessed without this school committee approving it. And as I understand it, also voters approving it. So this is presented as a no cost with benefits option to this board, but anything that would require an assessment would have to come back to get your approval before it could happen.
Would it be fair to say that the service center would only operate with the funds that are allocated to it by the legislature or by the state? And then if it wanted any extra or additional funding, it would have to go to board approval from the respective districts?
That is the correct interpretation of the law in this agreement.
So I also agree that this offers some great opportunities for savings. And I kind of say that tongue in cheek because that layer of government, it can so easily become out of control. But I think if this is formed, we formulate measurable goals right from the start. So I would really want to see that the superintendent's first charge is setting that up so that we can document any potential savings, or if it's, neutral. So I think it's a perfect opportunity, but I do think we have to place some safeguards, or at least the superintendent should be placing safeguards so that we can justify to the public this another layer of government.
Any further discussion? I just have a point of clarification, because from the previous board that sat here till now, the point we were hesitant before, we allowed you to move forward with it just to make sure you were moving forward with it. But the concern they had was the additional form of administration between all the districts, and then they formed their own board. So once it's voted by voters, that board would work amongst itself, and that added another layer of bureaucracy that they were concerned about. And right now it seems more like the carrot in front of the horse. We're getting some money for doing this, and that's encouraging. But is there a point where we're like, well, this is, once the board is formed and everybody's voted for it, is there a way to step out? That's the question first. But the other thing is, and that this was brought up by our legislators, in many ways we're already doing this. And that was the thing, like, we didn't get credit for already doing this. We already work with all the other districts. So there a point where we have to determine that? And is there, once we form this, is there a way of getting out of it?
So under the agreement as drafted, this board would have an annual option of withdrawing from the agreement. It must be done by February 1st of each year. And so that is definitely something that we should make perhaps even part of our operating procedures, that be reviewed and voted on in January of each year.
So would the vote, though, that the,
Just wait till it's finished.
well, I'm asking a question specific to his comment, so is
If
that
you
all
could-
right?
If you just wait, just 1 minute, it wasn't done. Thank you.
And I think, also at any time, this board would have the authority to direct its superintendent to do or not do anything in regard to this in terms of being executive director or perhaps other actions that this board feels that the center should do or not do. Again, we tried to draft this. This is the first agreement of its kind in the state of Maine, and trying to get something, a deal we approve that would preserve what now is, for all 4 districts, probably about $500,000 of funding from the state.
I'd like to ask you a question now.
So if it goes to voters, though, how would we have the authorization to reverse that? Would that have to be written in the initial vote, that it gives us authorization to do that?
So anything that would go to voters would have to go to the school committees first. So if you approve this agreement tonight, I will be working with Kathy Monteo on the ballot question, and I'll be pursuing approval with the Commissioner of Education. The ballot question, again, we're not asking voters for any funds. It would just be, do they approve entering into this agreement with the idea of trying to save some money and preserve subsidy?
Okay, so my question is more, if we decide we no longer want to be in this partnership, can the school committee reverse that vote of the electorate?
That's my understanding, yes. It would be up to the school committee as long as the determination was made prior to February 1st for the following year. July 1.
So, yeah, I guess I'm not understanding how that could override, how that would override an electoral vote.
The way, and there's some legalese in here, the way the attorneys got around the state law was, it's like being a member of a club that never meets, as I understand it. There would be no obligations, and any commitment of time or otherwise would cease as a way to get around the law that now, or initially at least, was interpreted to mean that you'd have to be in it forever.
I think to follow up on Mark's question, could there be, so I'm reading what is proposed to go to voters, if you added additional language that stated that the school committee reviews every year, or something that says that we have the authority to override that vote, I think is what you're getting at.
My sense is that that would not pass muster with the Department of Education. Again, I'm not an attorney. One option, if you wish, this body could approve the agreement as drafted tonight, but also ask for a second vote before it goes to voters, we would have to do that at the next meeting, and we could arrange for our school council to answer that question.
Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at the second document in our packet at the bottom of page 7. I don't know if you guys have that up. I want to say it's Article 17, subsection A. I think that's where it discusses withdrawals. The way I'm reading that is it indicates that we would have to have a withdrawal agreement. And that would have to be made between the board of directors and our superintendent. So it wouldn't be as clear as, at least the way I'm reading this, it wouldn't be as clear as school committee taking a vote. We would still have to give them about a fiscal year's notice and then go into an agreement to withdraw.
Any other discussion from the board?
So I would be supportive of this, but I truly think we need an attorney to tell us that if the public votes that we will join this, that we have the authority as a school committee to renege on that or back out without going to another vote.
I would agree with what you were saying. Is too much interpretation of what we're reading. And we need just further interpretation that it's truly what it's saying, not just an interpretation of it. And any other discussion? Ms. Hutchinson?
I move that we table this till the next meeting and instruct Mr. Webster to have the council here to interpret this for us.
Do you mind if Mr. Webster comments on this before it's seconded?
My only concern is one of timing. We have to give 60-day notice for absentee ballots. And I believe, I need to confirm, but I believe the June election was on June 12th. I hear, yes. So I need to work with Kathy Monteo on the referendum question, and it needs to be available to voters by April 12th. So, if there was a way that the board could approve the agreement, but still say that before proceeding with the vote of the public, that you would like to have the attorney here, that would allow me at least to petition DOE to get that approval process going and to work with Kathy Monteo and still meet the requirements of the proposal.
I see the importance of the deadline, but is there a deadline based on the future board or processing of the information right at this time? Or is it just the election that you're looking forward to?
My only concern is needing to get the commissioner's approval in time so that the city clerk can certify. I mean, the council, I guess, has probably got to set the election. That I don't know about that, but I do know that time is of the essence and want to get the process going.
So I'm comfortable with passing this because, whoever makes the motion originally can ask for it to be reconsidered. So I'm comfortable with that. One, I think the attorney's going to say that we will have the authority, but I just need to hear that personally.
All right, I'm going to open it up to public comment first. Okay, that's right. So, before we open it up to public comment, do we have a second on the motion to table this?
I'll second the motion.
I guess there was a second. All right, so we have a motion to table by Ms. Hutchinson and a second by Mr. Jensen. Those in favor? 3. You got those 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And abstained. You have 2. Okay, so it's not going anywhere. So we will open it up to public comment.
Matt Roy, Ward 6 again. As Bill in his introduction mentioned, this basically got stuck in the state budget at the wee hours of somewhere between July midnight the 30th and July 2nd, which, as if we look back retrospectively to basically this time last year, this whole concept is ironic at best, since we had people in Augusta, the department and the governor saying that we school districts spread out everywhere in Maine spend too much on local administration, but yet we're forced by government fiat, we'll take all your money, we'll take a portion of your money away, but you have to create more administration, hence, by definition, the great irony here. And the other irony, as the chair rightly points out from the discussion we had last fall, and as Ms. Parks and Mr. Jensen will remember, I don't think there's a single member of the last board that was actually in favor of this, based on a multitude of issues. There was no withdrawal, and basically this is just the school consolidation back in the Baldacci era, morphed, rearranged, which apparently is like what the state government lately does. If you look back to also Baldacci on the county jail issue, and then the debt issue that they try to bring up. At least that one died. This one came back again. Of course, another issue is that, like I said, no withdrawal. We had to have this operational by July 1st, which basically we had 6 months to do. We still have 6 months to do, but there's a potential for withdrawal. And when Bill submitted his testimony, because there was a bill which I don't know if it's because DOE is going to interpret the law how they want to with their regulations, or this bill actually did pass somehow regarding this issue about certain penalties that would been taken away. Maybe Bill could comment on that later on for the usefulness of discussion purposes. But of course, and then there still seems to be ambiguity about the whole issue, as Mr. Kayer kind of was in his question, in his discussion points thank you, Mr. Chair, was bringing up. And I was very vocal point, because one of those vocal points or voices last fall, because of it creates this another layer, but school districts spend too much money on administration. Of course, Lewiston, compared to every other basically school district, probably spends the least on district and system administration on a per pupil cost. And that's, there are other districts, and of course, if I remember right, of the 200-something school districts, there's only going to be 14 of these centers, possibly, if each of all the member districts of these 14 proposals actually go anywhere. And as I said, this is only going to create more bureaucracy. And as Mr. Jensen points out, there are 2 points, i.e. the executive director, the initial executive director is by the agreement is a member of the board, and there's no actual, we're dealing with taxpayer funds. There's no connection between accountability, as Mr. Jensen says, between that and a board of 4 superintendents. And actually, it's a 3/4, because if you do the math of 4, and if all 4 districts agree to join 2/3, that only gets you the 2.6. So it's actually a 3/4. And of course, then there's the ambiguity, basically Bill's ambiguity here, being director, the executive director, and a member of the board itself. Thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, I'll open it up back to the board. Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, I honestly, I think we should table the vote. I can't vote in favor tonight, knowing that, I mean, the way I'm reading this, it really seems like once taxpayers, once voters, I should say, agree to it, the only way to get out is to create an agreement with the regional service center itself, and that doesn't really put us in a good position. So the idea that we could just leave at any point in time, I'm not comfortable. I just don't believe that's the case, so I'd rather hear from our attorney before going forward with it. So those are my reservations at this point. I do understand the time constraint. So I'd like to think of some kind of compromise, but unless one can be met, I don't think I could be supportive. So that's why I'd favor just tabling the motion for a later date.
Any other discussion before I move it to Mr. Webster? Ms. Ray?
A clarification question on, I think you said it at the beginning, but just to reiterate, council drafted this agreement, so they have seen it, and we might not have the answer to the specific questions we are asking, but they have consulted with this already. Is that correct? I see you nodding, but
That is correct.
thank you.
So I'm looking at this is that approval of this agreement funds 4 teaching positions in Lewiston Public Schools. And rejection of this agreement is a $200,000 budget cut for Lewiston Public Schools, because this is in our budget right now. So in thinking about a potential compromise, and if I had more time to think about it, I could come up with better wording, but something to the effect that approve the agreement as drafted, but also direct the superintendent or move that there will be a second vote before this proceeds to voters. That would seem to allow me to go ahead, but it would protect the board and the considerations, and I would arrange to have Dan Stockford, our attorney, at another meeting coming right up.
Mr. Chair, I'd be comfortable with that. I think that'd be
Would you
good.
like to make a motion?
Yes. I don't know if I can so move this one. Check back the agenda here. Let's see. I move we agree. I move we approve the agreement. The agreement with other schools to form a regional service center. With the amendment. Okay, yeah, with the recommendation of the superintendent as amended. Struggling there.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion by Mr. Jensen, a second by Mr. Kerr. Is there any more discussion from the board before we move with the vote? Ms. Ray?
I'm so sorry. Could you read the motion again?
So if I may, move to accept the agreement as presented and direct that there be a second vote of the school committee before authorizing a go to voters. I might pretty that up a little bit.
That was much better than I.
All right, any other discussion before we move ahead? All right, those in favor? Myself as well. Those not in favor? Ms. Hutchinson. All right. Thank you, everyone. Moving ahead to item number 8, to receive and approve recommendation from Facilities Subcommittee regarding creation of Visual and Performing Arts Building Committee. Subcommittee Chair Luke Jensen will be presenting, not Bill Webster this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see. So very excited to announce unanimous decision by our Facilities Committee to create a dedicated committee for the building itself. to really help out with the project. Let's see. And so, let's see, I can just go through the list here of our members. Well, myself serving as chair, yourself, Mr. Chair, of course, being a member. We'll have our school committee member, Ms. Hutchinson, who's also a member of the facilities subcommittee. It's essentially everybody that was on the facilities subcommittee, well, right now, and all the members of the visual and performing arts committee itself. So rather than just the visual performing arts committee, this is a dedicated committee for the building itself, for that project. So also in the list, Bruce Damon, Superintendent Webster, Ronnie Parody, Louis Turcart, our facilities director. And from the VPA committee, we have Principal Langlis, Darren Avery, let's see, Nathaniel Meyer, Keena Petula, Robert Reed, let's see, committee member of the finance committee, Karen McClure Richard, a parent who is with us tonight. Mackenzie Richard, Paula Maselli, J.R. Davis, Roger Fuller, State Representative, and Richard Martin. So we have a fantastic group. I'm hoping for the board's approval tonight to make it official, set the ball in motion, make it an official committee. I believe yourself, Mr. Chair, could still add members down the line if you see fit. So that's certainly an option as well. So with that, I will make a motion to authorize the creation and membership as proposed of a visual and performing arts building committee to oversee all aspects of the project development and budget for visual and performing arts improvements at Lewiston High School.
Second. No.
Thank you. I just want to also clarify, for those who aren't familiar, the Visual and Performing Arts Committee was under the supervision and direction of the superintendent at the time. So it was a superintendent committee at the time, and now we're asking to be combined with the facilities committee to become a school board committee. Subcommittee, yeah, basically. Any discussion? All right. So we have a motion on the table by Mr. Jensen, a second by Ms. Roy. Those in favor? It is unanimous. I think we're good. Thank you. All right. All right, moving ahead to item number 9, to receive a report from Superintendent on proficiency-based learning. There's no motion required on this, but Mr. Webster will be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And many of you already have seen and read my remarks, but I'm going to basically read them verbatim for the record. Issues and semi-related issues around proficiency-based learning, PBL, have dominated recent public comments to the Lewiston School Committee. While some, if not many, of the issues raised were addressed by previous school committees, our present committee has been put in the position of being asked to reaffirm or change the direction of Lewiston Public Schools as it relates to PBL. This is an unenviable position because of the steep learning curve on this educational topic, as well as the passions of many on the conflicting options that exist. As superintendent charged with running Lewiston Public Schools, I have concluded that I need to make a number of decisions now that will both seek to find some acceptable ground for most and end the paralysis that is restricting our ability to move forward. The school committee may ultimately choose to change these decisions through policy or budget decisions, but I believe that collectively they will give the school committee more time to learn, reflect, and make any necessary and appropriate course corrections. It will also It also will allow Lewiston Public Schools to continue the planning for this coming school year in a thoughtful manner. So, to this end, I report that, number one, Lewiston Public Schools remains committed to proficiency-based learning and providing students with expanded opportunities to learn and show mastery of standards. A key component of our work is continuing the separation of habits of work from academic achievement. Number two, in the last year, PowerSchool has been significantly improved for use in proficiency-based systems. Effective with the 2018-19 school year, Lewiston Public Schools will use PowerSchool for all K-12 student reporting. This will put our student information system and grading system back on the same single platform. Where presently used, Empower will continue to be used through the end of this school year only. We will work to ensure that appropriate student information presently in Empower is retained and accessible going forward. Number three, money spent in the Empower software will be reallocated to additional teacher professional development to foster as smooth transition as possible. Number four, K-8 student reporting will continue to be on a 1 to 4 scale. We believe that this proficiency scale is best for students and are excited about the upcoming partnership with high-performing King Middle School in Portland, which will bring project-based learning to Lewiston. King uses a 1 to 4 scale for student reporting and will be sharing their scoring criteria and other supports with Lewiston Middle School. Number five, next year we'll use a 100-point proficiency scale for all high school students. Principal Jake Langlace will lead the effort with his staff to implement this change. We want to do this in a way that utilizes and does not detract from the great work already done by Lewiston High School teachers, particularly those on the freshman teams. Per board policy IKA, Principal Langlace will be making a recommendation to the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee on needed changes to grading policy IKA prior to their next meeting, scheduled for April 9th. Number six, this year's freshman students will have their 1 to 4 course grades converted to a 100-point scale. This will ensure that they have a common reporting scale for all 4 years of high school. We will also take great care to make sure that the conversion will not disadvantage students. Number seven, one benefit only offered by Empower was the capability to report on standards at multiple grade levels for the same student. We now need to determine how to use PowerSchool or other means to accomplish this goal. This is particularly important for many of our ELL, special education, and gifted and talented student populations, where students are either behind or ahead of their grade level standards. Number 8, our work for next year must include the following. A, seeking ways to reduce the teacher time needed to input evidence and grades. B, improving communication to parents, including sending more student work home. C, refining and revising standards and success criteria to be clearer to students and parents, and where appropriate, reducing the number of standards being reported out. So in conclusion, the steps that I've outlined will not meet the full expectations of many stakeholders, and they will also be a big disappointment to many others. I do hope, though, that most everyone can find enough balance and merit in this solution to be supportive of this direction and recommit to the important work ahead as we seek to support the success of all students in Lewiston. Thank you.
to open it up to the discussion from the board. Mr. Kerr, then Ms. Parks. Yep. Oh, okay, I thought you had a question. So directly to Ms. Parks then.
One of the other things I'd like to add to what we need to work on is planning now for transitions between grades 8 and 9 for students, for the younger grades, and especially the younger grades who will have never experienced the 0 to 100 grading by the time they get there. I don't want to wait until they're about to transition to start planning for that.
That's good.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from the board? I will just reiterate what Ms. Parks said. I think training is crucial. I think we've heard that across all spectrums in this community. And the sooner we can get on top of that, the better outcome we'll have in the future. Mr. Jensen, you had another?
I know nothing's actionable tonight, but I was just curious to get audience take.
Absolutely. Ms. Hutchinson? Sorry.
I want to take a moment and thank Mr. Webster for being willing to listen and hear us and come up with a compromise that, while may not be perfect for everyone, is a start in moving us towards having the discussions about multiple pathways, our gifted and talented students, and all other avenues of PBL that we have yet to be able to address because we've been stuck on grading systems. So thank you.
Mr. Jensen, did you have some?
It was more procedural. I was just thinking, because this and the next agenda item are pretty similar, I didn't know if we wanted to hear both. We heard the one presentation, hear the second presentation, and then get public comment, and then discuss it as a board. I figured that might be more efficient.
I think I see it as two different agenda items because it's a part of a subcommittee. But well, any other discussion from the board before I open it up to public? All right. I'm just going to ask by show of hands how many in the public would like to speak tonight. Wow, that's unusual. Okay. All right. Anyone from the audience that would like to speak tonight? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. All right. Then I guess Mr. Jensen.
Just real quick, I called Bill as soon as I read this. I'm impressed with it. I think it was a sign of leadership on his part. So I appreciate his in taking time that hopefully meets needs on both sides of this issue. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might. Yes, that's on. In addition to Bill, thank you. But thank you to everyone who reached out to the school committee over the past couple weeks. I have read so many emails, so many very lengthy and passionately written emails and letters and thoughts and follow-up. And the passion that the community and employees and students have brought to this subject is terrific, and I really appreciate that. I hope we can also transfer it to the school budget now that we have some more direction on where the Empower funding might go as well. So thank you to the whole community for that.
Ms. Quartermash?
Just what are the next steps for the proposal tonight? Is this going to go back to the subcommittee? I guess I'm just confused at how we're going to proceed with this proposal.
I'll start and I'll pass it to Mr. Webster. Basically, it'll move to the subcommittee for review of the policy with the input from the administration as well as from the teaching and learning committee as well. And then that policy will come back to us for review and a vote for the changes, if that's the way I understand it correctly. But Mr. Webster may want to elaborate.
Yeah, so the keyboard policy is IKA, and so Principal Langleys will be working with his team in accordance with the policy to come with a proposal. They're the ones that are going to have to work hardest on that implementation of a 100-point scale in a PBL system. And so that the goal is for him to present something to the subcommittee, and hopefully he'll get it to you prior so you could read it prior to your April 9th meeting, I believe it is. And then when it comes to the costs of Empower and any other issues that relate to the budget, that would be part of the budget process.
Ms. Parks?
Do we have a contract with Empower that, so we will have to pay them longer than we're using the service?
So our contract is for this school year.
Any other discussion from the board? I also want to thank this board for being patient and being able and willing to listen to our community, our students, our teachers, and everyone involved. It's been an interesting few weeks, to say the least. And we can go back even further than that, but the last few weeks have been really hard work, basically, even for the administration and Mr. Webster here as well. And glad we got to this point. And I'm sure we'll hear much more from everyone as well as we move forward and make additional changes and improvements as we move forward. And as I say that, I'll ask the board again, any other discussion? All right, thank you everyone. We'll move ahead with agenda item number 11, number 10, to receive a report from the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee. Ms. Tina Hutchinson, please.
So the Teaching and Learning Committee met March 12th, and we were just starting the process of coming up with a proactive solution to some of the concerns that were raised in the public. Mr. Webster's proposal has now come up with a proactive plan that I think we can all live with. So going forward, we'll be looking at IKA and changes that need to be made to that. But I also think the Teaching and Learning Committee can be a part of improving the communication to parents, as well as some of the other options that are on the table of what we need to improve on. I think we can start having the discussions on multiple pathways, and what we do with our students that have finished the standards early, and moving them ahead. The more minds at the table, sometimes the better the outcome. But it's time we all put aside any hard feelings that we may have, and move forward. And that's come to the table with your listening ears on and be willing to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. And our next meeting is April 9th.
Any members of the board have questions or comments for Ms. Hutchinson?
Mr. Chair. I want to say a big thank you to Ms. Hutchinson for the years of her dedication to PBL and the students and the teachers. I think hearing from everyone has been fantastic. Having Tina on the board to have the background and the knowledge to get us to move forward with some changes that needed to be made were really beneficial to have her on the board. So I just want to thank you for putting up with everything and doing everything and getting us to where we needed to be. Thank you.
So while I thank Ms. Estabrook, to me, part of the job requires that we make sure everybody gets the information they need. And if that means setting up meetings with subcommittee members and Mr. Shabbat so they can ask their questions, or that means meeting with Mr. Gagnon and Mr. Webster to get my questions answered, then that's what we do. This is a team effort. It's not me. It's not Mr. Webster. It's not Mr. Gagnon. It's a team. That means every community member, every student, every teacher, and every board member. So we need to continue to work together to move forward. Thank you.
Any other discussion from the board? Would you like me to open it up? Mr. Jensen.
I guess just a point of clarification. So the idea is to take the superintendent's recommendations, vet them as a teaching and learning subcommittee, and are they going to come back to the board?
It's my plan that we will discuss IKA hopefully on April 9th, and bring that to the board hopefully that evening for its first reading. Any other suggestions that may come out of the board will also, out of the subcommittee, will also come back to this board, whether it be as a report out or asking for a vote, depending on what the situation is.
Okay, so the only policy right now that we would be scheduled to review would be policy IKA.
I believe Mr. Webster can answer that, but I believe that's the one that must be addressed currently, although that may end up following into the homework policy and everything as moving forward, based on changes.
That is correct, plus the adoption of the budget.
Any other discussion from the board? Okay, there is no action on this, so we'll move ahead. And at this point, I think we'll take a 5-minute break.
You don't want to just do
No, we'll just take a 5-minute break because we want to clear up the room. And I need to go to the restroom. welcome back. We will move forward with agenda number 11, report from City Council Representative.
So two things that I wanted to let the school committee know about. Tomorrow night, very exciting, we're getting our city budget books, and we'll be moving to 2 budget meetings a week on Tuesday, Thursdays. So Monday through Thursday, let's talk budget. And then secondly, right after we get that presentation at our workshop, we will then hear a presentation from Green Dot LA. For those who haven't heard of this program before, it's a bystander intervention program that works to help people recognize events that might be labeled as red dots that are harmful to our community and to community standards. And it identifies different ways that community members can kind of step up and take action to turn those red dots into green dots, is kind of the background theory behind it. This is a really successful program model. I did it in my undergraduate at Connecticut College. It's now at Bates College, and it's really working to change community culture as a whole by making everyone feel responsible for when harmful things happen and you might have been able to intervene. So we'll hear a 20-minute presentation by Green Dot LA tomorrow. So I'd encourage you to either tune in on our live viewing or come to the meeting or watch it afterwards just to hear about it. And if you have more questions, I'd be happy to answer those too. Thanks.
Moving ahead to item number 13, report from the school superintendent.
Does that mean there's no report from the school committee chair, item 12?
Did I miss that? Yes, I did. Well, we'll go to you first. How's that?
Okay, well, I've talked enough tonight. I don't think I need to say
Is
anymore.
that okay with the parliamentarian? Over it? Okay. Am I going? Okay. We're being polite, I guess, tonight. Okay, so I wanted to start with something interesting and exciting, something that's never been seen before, and that is something that Miss Megan Parks introduced, and I wanted to just give her the mic for a moment to introduce the. Oh, so do I. Thank you. The kickball tournament.
So the Lewiston Auburn Metro Chamber of Commerce is holding a kickball tournament April 28th, and they're signing up teams. And so I signed up the Lewiston School Committee and Lewiston Public Schools for a team. So we will all be playing in a kickball tournament and injuring ourselves for anyone who wants to come and watch. We do still need players. I emailed Bill about that earlier.
Jay? Enforcer.
Just saying.
I'm sure he could kick that ball right across the field right there.
It's an indoor tournament. I just yelled. I didn't realize the mic was on. It's indoors at Ingersoll Arena. So it's not even out in the cold.
And if I may, you're going to speak to Sue Turgeon if you want solicitation here at the Dingley Building, right?
I emailed you earlier, but I'll email.
Okay, good, thank you.
Just another note to that, Tanya Estabrook is designing the T-shirts, and so if that interests you, I think that is a pull. Yeah.
Love some input.
No, we're not doing knee-high socks. I support you.
I just wish it was recorded because I would love to see that action on video, and I'm unfortunately unable to participate because of family and friends coming from Canada, and another event that I have that evening as well. But if I can, I will certainly come and attend in the audience and cheer you on. Maybe I'll bring some cheerleaders. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet because of everything that's been going on in the last few weeks. I want to thank everybody again for all the patience, hard work that's gone into that in the last few weeks. I know several of us have lost a lot of sleep and had to communicate very effectively in various ways, and I hope we can continue that form of communication, as in all lines of communication open and being responsive to that as well throughout our entire community, as well as our schools, the superintendent, myself, and the school board. And now we'll leave it at that and move with the superintendent's report, number 13.
Well, I did just think of one thing I do want to mention. On Thursday, March 29th, I believe. Let me just check my calendar. Yes, that is the next and likely the last in this cycle community forum on the Visual and Performing Arts Center. The architects will be presenting the concept plans for the building. I think there'll be some images of what it might look like on the exterior as well as interior space. And this will be the last opportunity to provide input before their final report, which will then go to the new building committee to talk about next steps.
Anything else? And I sat in on, just briefly, on a online video chat, and they showed some samples of the outline they had with blueprints, I guess, if you want to call them that, and it was very fascinating. It certainly drove a lot of excitement and discussion, and I think if you come, I think it'll drive a lot of that excitement and discussion as well, to see what is already transpired in the visual concept plan of what this Visual and Performing Arts Center could bring to this district. So it'll be exciting. All right, item number 14, future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items anybody would like to bring up? You're nodding your head? No? Okay. Everybody over here?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question of how that procedure goes. Like, if no matter what, we can just say this at this point and say, you know, I don't have any example, but if I wanted to talk about something next time, I could just say whatever. Do I have to go through a subcommittee, or how does that work?
Well, you could
Or
always
talk to you.
You could always bring it up to my attention, but this is a time and place where we're all together in a public forum, so that I can make a note of it, and I will try to bring it to the agenda with the superintendent in a future agenda item. Any others? We might finish before 9 o'clock. Is it? Yeah, Matt's all. I just see a hand in the air. Okay, Mr. Langlis wanted to say something that is not a future agenda item.
I just want to make a quick note that the student reps are not here today because they're competing at the Future Business Leaders of America competitions. I wish them luck.
Thank you. I had heard from one but not the other, so thank you for letting me know. Mr. Jensen.
I move with adjourn.
Second.
It was over here.
Who was it?
It was Megan. I heard
All
it.
of them? Parks? All right, Parks. She spoke second. Okay. Those in favor?